listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast, where we bring you insights and inspiration for growing your publishing business. We're your hosts. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Joni.
And I'm Tara.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to 2021 and the first episode of the year for the Kobo Writing Life podcast.
Woohoo! Pat yourself on the back for getting through 2020. It is behind us. We don't have to think about it anymore.
Proud of all of us.
We did well.
So this week on the podcast, we are talking to Pieter Swinkels, who is the Chief Content Officer at Rakuten Kobo. Pieter is responsible for the growth of Kobo's worldwide content catalog and driving business relationships with publishers, agents, and authors.
In addition, his responsibilities include expanding the Kobo Writing Life self-publishing platform, expanding the Kobo Plus subscription service, and continuing to build out the Kobo Originals program of new and exclusive ebooks, audiobooks, and podcast content.
We had a great chat with Pieter where we talked about all of his insights of having been at Kobo for quite some time and his perspective with his traditional publishing background and where he thinks things are going to go in the future.
So it's a great episode. We hope you enjoy it and please keep listening. Thank you, Pieter, for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you very much for having me.
And before we get into everything, can you just tell us what you do at Kobo and kind of how you got your start in publishing?
Sure. So my role at Kobo is Chief Content Officer, which means I lead the teams that work with publishers and with anything to do with content, which includes the regular publishers, it includes Kobo Writing Life, and it includes the Originals program, as well as the content operations. That is a team that makes sure the files and the metadata flows from the publishers into our systems. And I started in publishing. It's hard to look back because it's, looking back means, you're beginning to form a narrative and everything leads to this point. But so I studied, I was trained as a microbiologist and food scientist. And after that, I realized I wanted to do something else and studied literature, English literature at the University of Amsterdam. And after that, I moved to Ireland and studied Irish literature and English at Trinity College, embarked on a PhD, and after a while realized that wasn't for me. I returned to Holland and had no idea what to do. Absolutely no idea. The closest thing that looked like a job was a publisher or editor. And by then, of course, I had read a lot of books, so I felt completely skilled. It's, as you know, it's quite hard to get into publishing in many countries. So I started to read for several publishers. And then there was one big publishing house that had just appointed a new publisher. I was looking to build a new editorial team. And that was my stroke of luck because she decided to hire me without any editorial experience. And she said, I need someone fresh in the team. And, so she gave me a chance. And I worked, from then on, I worked very hard and became a publisher. And I think actually my background in microbiology, that's why I mentioned it, it always helped me, I think, because as a publisher to have a kind of an all-round background and have a diverse background is just very, very useful. Sometimes I feel people, are too limited when you only have a literary degree or a history degree and go into publishing. So for me, I felt it always helped me in my career. So I became a publisher, worked at a great Dutch literary house, the Busy Bee, the Basic Way, acquiring international fiction for translation. So developed my global network of editors and publishing friends and absolutely loved it. I just love the idea of having your finger on the literary pulse internationally and hear what was going on. So I would travel around, go to the book fairs, go to New York, speak to agents and scouts and editors, and published some really good books and grew up kind of in the publishing industry, and then decided to move to Canada because my wife is Canadian. And I realized I had to reinvent my career. I already was very interested in digital by then. That was upcoming in the 2008 and 2009. Ebooks became a thing. And in the traditional industry, people weren't that interested. I was fascinated by it. Kobo at the time was looking for the first European to join the team. I met Michael Temlin, our current CEO, and the rest maybe. It's been 10 years, almost 10 years, and it's been a very interesting journey because I was so interested because being a very traditional publisher, then to be able to join Kobo at the moment when really we started to grow to expand in all these new markets and And it felt like going to a country and turning on electricity. And it was kind of magic. And since then, it always has remained a little magic because I got new assignments all the time and we've been able to innovate. And that allowed me to kind of help thinking where the industry could go and where we could take Kobo.
So I wanted to ask you about the differences between publishing in the Netherlands versus in North America. But actually, as you've said that you came over to Canada, you came straight to Kobo. I guess the question is also comparing traditional publishing with digital. So is there a big difference between North America and the Netherlands?
Yeah, it's hard to, these become very quickly very big generalizations. I mean, Europe as such doesn't really exist, right? It's, there's many different cultures and countries and backgrounds and small languages, big languages. So it's hard to speak without generalization. But in general, I think you could say that European houses on the whole tend to be run by people from the editorial side very often. Not always, but if you want to say something general, in North America, you see it's often more driven by cooperation and by corporate thinking. So there's often a commercial person or a salesperson in charge, and the final decision is often in the hands of a commercial person. Whereas in Europe, in many houses, particularly the larger literary houses, it is often still an editorial-driven decision, which makes for, all of these things have been changed, but it's still, you can tell simply the houses are built differently than in North America. Digital versus traditional print publishing. I mean, in the early days, for sure, North America was way ahead. Everything happened much faster here. Ebooks got a bigger market share faster. And Europe is still, the market share is still developing. Some markets faster than others. I think because of some of the players in the market, you can see that North American publishing is very entrenched. Some positions have been taken. There are big interests at stake, and it means that no one is really moving into new directions very quickly. In Europe, on the other hand, you see publishers are more willing at this stage to actually experiment and to move forward and to try out different models, which has helped Kobo a lot. When Kobo went to Europe, publishers were very happy to see another player, a player that's purely focused on reading and not trying to sell you lots of other things. We were always able to close very, very close relationships in local markets with publishers, with retailers, because they understood that it was very healthy for the market to have a player like Kobo gaining market share in their market. So we've always got quite a bit of goodwill and really focused on local markets to help publishers grow digital business.
I think that ties into the next question pretty well, of just what do you think are some of the major evolutions that you've seen in publishing over the years, not just, I feel like 2020 has accelerated everything, but what have you seen so far and what are your predictions for the future?
How far are we going back? Going back to which century we're talking?
We're like from oral to current day. Can you do that?
In a way, nothing changed. That's the beauty. I think many people in the industry love this industry so much because it is so beautiful. You work with an original talent, with a creative person, and as a publisher, however you define publisher, but you try to connect that creativity to an audience. Anything in between is changing, evolving all the time, and is changing positions. But if you would go back to Antwerp, to the Plantin Museum, you see one of the oldest printing presses in the world. And it's, everything is different technology, but in the end, they were trying to print Bibles and then had scholars in their house because they realized they needed to do more than Bibles. And, they started to figure out distribution. And in a way, we're still doing what they did back then. And that's, for me, that's certainly something that's so attractive in this business. Of course, everything has changed. Nowadays, I've been talking about two major things. It's really how we consume reading, how we get access and consume reading, and how we produce reading material. And if you look at how we consume, it's, there's the attention economy, time economy. There's so much we can do nowadays besides reading. That's become a big competitor. How we consume, everything on the internet gravitates to subscriptions. So we see streaming and subscriptions as a real factor of change nowadays. Audio for decades was like this small niche market. In many countries, simply the business wasn't even big enough to produce audiobooks. And nowadays, it's this flourishing new thing that's just taking everybody, not by surprise, but it's certainly helping the industry as such to reach new audiences.
Yeah, I always kind of make the mistake of thinking of audiobooks as something new, and they're really not. Like, they're because books on tape and everything. So I have to remember when I'm like talking to authors about this, that this has been around. It's just a new digital boom.
And people are consuming it. It's really becoming a settled thing for people who love reading and who have kind of reading almost as a lifestyle. Audio, ebooks, and print are becoming things that you do. How we produce, well, you see these developments, big consolidations happening. Bigger. The top 5 in America became top 4, and then became the big 3. So big consolidations. You see a lot of verticalization where everybody is beginning to do everything, basically. That's a big change. And you see a kind of a fragmentation or atomization of the whole book supply chain. And all these things, of course, are related and have also, I think, given indie publishing or self-publishing a big push. Nowadays, you see that the big houses have to focus very, very much on the small number of titles. They've been producing more and more, but focus goes more to this very small list of titles that they can support. And even though they intend and genuinely intend to support every author and do some work, you see very quickly when the book gets traction, that's where the advertising needs to go and the marketing needs to go, because they need to have this 1 or 2 big blockbusters every year. That's fine if you're publisher number 10 or 15 or 25, but if you're publisher number 75 or 150, it's very hard to actually see what the publishing house adds to you, except from having a wonderful brand on the spine of your book. It also means that inside publishing houses, you can just see where editors would really be editing 30 years ago. Nowadays, they have, maybe an editor always has been a marketer as well, or I always say publishing is actually marketing, it's book marketing. But certainly, well, lots of editors really, really spend so much time on the manuscript. Nowadays, it's often either outsourced or it's people take it back home in the evening and in the weekends. And during the day, you are often working on producing marketing material, producing catalogs, you name it. But it also means that much of the traditional work has gone outside the offices. And that's what I call atomizing, because there's now this whole service industry around the traditional industry, but also for the accessible to independent publishing, where you have fantastic professional services and can make, you can produce really, really good quality self-published books. For indie publishing means, for a long time, traditional publishers looked a little bit down because it was considered a vanity press. And it was like, if you couldn't find a publishing house, you would go to a self-publishing house. That's way behind us now. This independent industry has become so interesting because you have everything from a truly singular author who's able to access a global audience, from behind your desk, to small startup or not so small startup digital publishers that get then acquired again by the traditional industry. So those things, the way we consume, the way we produce, all these things are changing and are interacting with each other. The other big factor, I would say, is there are now, what we call the book industry really was kind of the trade industry, where an author found an agent or a publisher, gets published, gets into the trade book retail and finds an audience. But more and more, the trade industry itself is surrounded by lots of other industries that kind of see publishing as an extension of their marketing. So if a brand or a company wants to, they create a marketing material, that's a creative activity as well. And it quickly becomes the act of publishing. So advertisers and other industries are using, of course, narratives and use storytelling as a way to convey a message. That's storytelling. Of course, it's exactly what it is. It helps you to make sense of the world. And if you want to push that making sense of the world towards your brand, a narrative structure is really helpful. So publishing is no longer just the act of trade publishing. It's become an extension of your brand building. I think all the things are interesting and are happening right now. And you see a number of directions coming out of that. And that's, as Kobo, of course, we try to look at those and incorporate them in our business plans.
I like that you say that book publishing is marketing. I think that's a great point, because some indies that are maybe new to this might feel a little overwhelmed at the thought of like what to do with marketing and how to kind of tap into your audience. But it really is just selling your book. And I think that the word marketing can be kind of scary. But so I like that you've broken it down like that.
Well, marketing is interesting. I used to feel very intimidated by it when I started as a publisher. you're very worried if you can actually find and identify the right books, and you're very worried you missed the big next book, whether it's a literary talent or a best-selling potential. That's in a way the easy part of publishing. If you've read a number of books, you quickly begin to realize which books are actually good and not good, and which books can maybe some, which not. But as an editor, you also learn that the moment you start to read the manuscript, you start thinking about how am I going to get this to an audience. So I would literally imagine right away, how would I pitch this if I would be standing in the biggest bookstore? How would I actually sell this to someone who walks into that store? What is it that in this book that I can take and anchor to someone? And that journey starts by you going to your PR team, you going to your marketing team, and you try out if the book has traction, if it's sticky. What is it in the book? If you put it down like a thriller or romance, or which slant do you take? And that's the positioning of the book is actually what I think a good editor really does when he selects the book for his list. So marketing seems this mysterious thing that happens, but it is actually very simple in the sense that you try to figure out how to position the book or the product that you have, and what story you need to create around it to make it sticky to an audience, and how to find the audience and connect to that audience that you envisage for that book. So for self-publishing authors who think about this, they do all the time, because they do write maybe maybe they have an audience in their mind, or they try to imagine who will read this. And that's the first step of a marketing plan.
In publishing school, I never forgot that they were like, the best way to market a book is word of mouth. So like you just need one person and then anyone can pick up your book after that.
And I think that's what makes publishing almost addictive, because it's something that's so hard to control, right, or to influence. Publishers have done anything and everything to kind of start that word of mouth, and it's this phenomenon of hypes and again stickiness. And what is it that some books that makes people talk about some books, and some of the books that you absolutely sure people will start talking about, they actually don't. Every publisher, we always talk about the successes, and as a publisher, you have to celebrate those successes. But most books, it depends how you define success. Critical success is as important. But at the end of the day, you'll also have to have books that find an audience. And most books don't find the audience that you think there is out there. So that words of mouth, once it happens, it makes sense. And book retailers in general are extremely good in discovering a bestseller once it is a bestseller, and then they ask for more. But the harder thing is to get a book into the stores, or get your booksellers enthusiastic about a book that isn't a bestseller yet. And it's this it's a magic thing. Once you see word of mouth beginning to happen, it is the most beautiful kind of natural phenomenon you can see as a publisher.
I think that's a good segue into our next question. As you mentioned, you've been at Kobo for almost 10 years at this point.
Yeah.
What do you think has been one of the key abilities that we've been able to do to make us successful alongside major competitors like Amazon or iBooks or things like that?
For Kobo in general, I think, it's always tricky to explain success, but I think we've made a number of choices that went down really well for us. First of all, we've always focused on reading, and reading only. Everything we do is about reading. Everything we do is to enable reading, which makes it much easier to really focus on it. We don't have to sell dishwashers or anything else. We don't want to get you into our ecosystem to sell you a zillion other things. We are a reading company. We're a reading platform. We create fantastic devices and apps to enable you to read. And everything we do is really about that. So I think which sounds maybe, in the early days, many of the companies and the early startups that we were competing with were trying to do a lot of different things. And we've been able to focus on reading. That helps us to differentiate from anyone else in the business. It also helped us to partner with a number of strong retailers around the world that saw this digital revolution happening and didn't have the means to compete with it. And all of a sudden, there's this friendly company from Canada that is offering you a world-class solution to compete with the biggest tech companies in the world. Many people at Kobo are from the book industry, so we were able to connect to them and partner with them and really help them in their local markets to offer an e-reading solution. And that helped Kobo as a startup, as a small brand still, to go right into the heart of local book markets and find the readers that you need most. Maybe we missed a lot of readers because of that, but those readers were readers maybe that buy not that many books. We thrive from the people that read a lot of books with Kobo, and those are the people we focus on. So that's one key element, I would say. And the other thing is, I think we've actually managed to apply a high level of self-discipline, because there's always 1,000 things you can do, and there's so many directions and so many more countries and so many more products you can make, and kind of the ongoing decision process of what are we going to do next, what are we going to do next year, what are we doing, what are we not doing. All of you know it's kind of an ongoing battle, which is sometimes not a bloody battle, but it's pretty fierce because everybody has ideas. And I think it's to our credit, we've been able to figure out a way to make, some really good decisions. Some haven't worked out, and then we've adjusted, but really focus on where we want to go next, instead of kind of drowning in the sea of ideas and opportunities that are also great, but that could also really pull you under and drown you.
So the new wave of digital publishing really opened up the doors for indies to come in and forge their own paths in publishing and essentially bypass the traditional world. So as somebody that has a lot of experience with both trad publishing and independent, is there anything that stands out to you that indies do differently to trad and possibly do better?
Yeah, I mean, indie publishing is just absolutely fascinating. If you know how the biggest publishing houses with decades, centuries sometimes of know-how and experience, how they struggle to create a new bestseller and to find an audience and capture that word of mouth and all of it. And then to see how indie publishing with so little means manages to break out books, not just once or twice, but on a pretty steady pace, and have built this market share in the book industry, in the reading industry, that is just phenomenal. You still sometimes hear traditional media reporting on the decline of ebooks, and it's the real thing, because the opposite is true. What they report on is the traditional business, the business that is actually measured and that's reported on. The indie industry is usually, nearly always, completely excluded from that. What people still don't seem to realize, that there is this massive shift happening from traditional publishers, who are still very strong and doing really well, but still the cork that they all float on, the commercial cork, the cork of mainstream commercial fiction, is slowly but surely shifting to another part of the industry that's outside the main industry, and that's indie publishing. So I'm fascinated by how these authors and small publishing houses can do this. And if you look at it, there's one thing that just jumps out right away. It's the fanaticism of an independent publisher. They have the huge advantage that they don't have to spread their focus on over 300 titles, but can focus on one particular author and one particular series, day in, day out, for years. That's, I think, an advantage that's so obvious, but they're often forgotten. If you add to that, they do really act like a startup company. They look, they see if it works. If it doesn't work, they adjust. If the cover doesn't work, let's change the cover. If the narrative doesn't work, next narrative will be different. So there's a high pace of publishing. The regular industry can handle, one book a year maybe. There's some global authors, like if you're James Patterson, the market will absorb more books. But for most authors and for most markets, 1, maybe 2 books a year is really the max that the traditional book trade will absorb. Self-publishing authors are always looking for this rhythm. Like, first of all, they write in series, so there's an ongoing connection between the reader and the author, and they just publish way faster, which means they are more present, they can learn faster, they can adjust faster. What I also like about that, it's like writing is a fantastic thing, and the creative mind is an amazing thing to observe. But there is also a myth of creativity around it that self-publishing kind of destroys, by saying, of course it's a creative process. That doesn't mean we have to sit down and wait till inspiration strikes. We can also see it as a product. So they think like a producer and like a startup would, and apply it to the creative process, and that's marvelous. So those are It's a couple of the things. What we also see, of course, is how the community, in particular in North America, but you see the same now evolving in other parts of the world, really work together, learn from each other. Although they're all competitors, you go, as you do very often, you go to the conferences and you see people talking to each other, giving each other tips, helping each other. It is not always, but we have seen some other, but on the whole, it's a very friendly, supportive community to each other. What I'm surprised by is how it's still, in general, indie market is very popular for a number of genres, and how it's not yet broken out to the more upmarket fiction or non-fiction and some other parts of the book industry. And I think, to be honest, there is still so much future and so much opportunity to break out. I have 2 young children myself, and the next James Joyce is not necessarily going to a traditional publishing house with this new masterwork, because the younger generations grow up with access to global platforms. So I think it's a matter of time till we see indie publishing becoming really reinventing itself again and becoming a much kind of broader thing than it is now.
I like that you said about Kobo that we've kind of kept a focus by making very strategic decisions. And I think maybe one of them that has been kind of really key is like not differentiating between indie and trad on our site. Like, books are books, and the customer is going to try and find the book that they want. They don't really care so much the source of how the book was published. So I wanted to ask you about like another decision that Kobo has sort of been making lately, which is on subscription models, and kind of what you think about this and how independent authors and publishers can take advantage of this sort of new audience.
Yeah, subscription models. I mean, to begin with, there's a lot of kind of fear and apprehension in the industry at large, also in the indie markets, for subscription models, because it's seen as a devaluation of kind of the book value. The whole book industry is still kind of, the monetary unit is one book, it's a single unit of a book, and it's so deep in our systems of thinking that you write a book, you print a book, and you sell a book, and you pay for the whole thing and nothing but the whole thing. And I kind of understand that, because I know the whole chain downstream too well to not understand how the whole industry is based on the one book. At the same time, like I said before, you see how content consumption on the internet is simply gravitating to subscriptions. And it's actually not just, of course, content, it's everything. Internet is fantastic for subscriptions. And my thinking really evolved around subscriptions a number of years ago when at Kobo we started to think about this. We, with our Dutch partner, bol.com, who really came to us and said, like, we have to work on subscriptions. And we weren't even so keen on it, because we were thinking, we really rather sell full price books. But the conversations with them and the market research with them and all the discussions we had with the local publishers and really investigated it, made clear that there is this whole audience, this whole group of consumers that actually wants to read, is willing to spend money on read, has time to read, but is not reading. And unfortunately, that group is only growing with the pressure of other content consumption, social media, streaming TV, gaming. They are managing to capture people and pull them into their services. The reading industry kind of doesn't do that. I mean, you still sell a lot of books, but they don't capture those new groups. So once we started to see how many people out there would be willing to pay for reading that are not paying for reading now because they go to libraries, or they read illegally, or they borrow books from other people, it became a different objectives. And we realized, how about we make subscriptions as a means to lower the threshold to reading. So instead of going into a bookstore, spend $25, come home and realize after 20 pages you actually don't like the book, now you've lost $25, why don't we use it as a way to make reading very, very easy. So you open the book, you start reading, you don't like it, start a new book. And again and again and again. We give you unlimited access to the books we have in the subscription service. Once you remove that threshold, people may be more tempted to actually spend money on reading. Also, the monthly fee is actually not a big amount. the value proposition is so worthwhile. What we see then as well is, as we see now in the markets where we have launched the subscriptions with our Kobo Plus program, is that it attracts people who usually spend way less on reading than they spent since they subscribed to Kobo Plus. So either they didn't buy books at all, or the total money spent on books was way less than the annual spending on subscription fees. So we've actually, this is a metaphor we used very often, and it's still, we increase the pie. There is more pie on the plate now that we can share with the publishers. We've developed a very fair model where the payments to publishers and authors is based on the consumption in our store. So it's an entirely fair model. We don't manipulate the earnings. We put all the money we put on the table and share with everybody. And it's, of course, there's some cannibalization. That's always the biggest fear. There's absolutely some cannibalization, but on the whole, that's very small if you compare it to the additional new readers that we get and the additional earnings we get. So I think it's better that we cannibalize ourselves, however painful it may feel just in the beginning, but I'd rather us doing it and introduce customers to new ways of reading and new consumption models than that we lose them forever. And subscriptions really taught me or made me think of something else that we actually hardly ever talk about in the traditional book industry. It's curious how we actually don't really work together to sell reading as such. We're always competing with each other. We're not really each other's competitors. The real competitors are these other industries that attract people away from reading. So I really believe in, if we work together with publishers and together with our retail partners to find the audience, to make people discover reading and get them hooked on reading, once we figure that out worked all together, then we can start to compete with each other. So nowadays I go to publishers and say, let's forget we're all competitors and we are negotiating about terms and what have you. Let's just pretend we would all be in the same company. How would we find readers? That's, I think, what we have to discover. How do we all together find readers for our books? Once we found the readers, we can begin to compete with each other and negotiate who gets who. But I think the traditional industry sometimes forgets that we are not competing so much with each other, but with this whole industry outside us that is trying to compel readers away from reading.
I think that kind of fits into the next question I have. What are you excited for Kobo to do or achieve or produce in the next couple of years?
Well, we were talking about subscriptions. I think subscriptions changes the way we look at content as well. And we see in our data, series are extremely popular. So we are working with a lot of publishers around the world and with a lot of authors and with a lot of the indie publishers to work on series and make them produce content that is really suitable for the subscription consumer. Every long work, short works, we will put everything in. But I think serialization is a big thing, and we'll continue to work with publishers too. Of course, we've also developed our own originals program that's very much geared towards the production of series. I think there's in the audio industry where audio is really beginning to cross over to the podcast industry. Of course, there are some kind of formal differences between podcasts and audiobooks. But in the end, it's all listening. So we approach this in the content team as anything we can listen to should be in our audio subscription, whether it's long or short, or it doesn't need to be a work of fiction or a narrative. Any narrative audio content is potentially interesting to listen to if you enjoy audiobooks as well. So I think that's interesting. And you see these, we've been making some high value production series that you kind of produce like a movie would, with real voice direction and high quality immersive sound experiences, and that kind of bring the movie industry together with the book industry in these audio series. That's personally, I'm very excited about that. As some of you know, I love some musicals, not all, but there's some really great musicals around it. I can't wait till we merge like singing books into our bookstore. Maybe that's my secret mission as a chief content, to get more music into books. So having said that, we've had several moments where we were kind of enhanced books, with the big neck thing, and it hasn't really happened yet. So I'm also curious to see. Usually, the first thing you think about is not how it works out. So I'm actually looking what's on the horizon of new formats and new experiences. There's a lot happening, and it's all very interesting. So that's what we're focusing on. What else? I think as we see, and this is slightly more high level, but as you see the big consolidation and big entertainment industry are spending a lot of money, investing a lot of money in verticalization, it also means there must be an opportunity for niche publishers and niche markets. In e-commerce, it's the niche is fantastic because they're easier to target and easier to find. And I think we'll see a lot on our side, but also in general in the industry, going to more niche-produced and niche-focused publishing. That's still a little vague, but I ask me again 3 years from now. Then I'll know how that worked out.
Definitely. Now we've come to my favorite question. What have you been loving lately? Maybe a musical. I don't know.
Hamilton is still big in our house, so that's not part of our daily diet. Has been
the Disney Plus one?
We were lucky enough to see the actual performance when I was in Toronto, so that was great.
I missed my date by a week, and then the pandemic happened.
All my family were watching me. They said, Papa's now going to cry every second. And every second. They were completely right. So I think for my publishing days, I kind of stopped reading bestsellers for a long time and read them only like a long time after, because if I read a book that I missed as an editor, I always feel terrible and I actually couldn't enjoy the book. So I often read books from a couple of years ago. So I've been reading several books right now and this year. The book the fiction book that really stood out for me was Normal People, Sally Rooney. I guess it reminded me a lot about Dublin, and it's set in Trinity, and I could just watch myself in my own kind of existential angst, trying to connect myself to the world. I think in general, it's such an intimate book, and it's such the way intimacy is translated into fiction, just astounding. It's so close, it's and by that it becomes so emotional and it becomes so real. Although there's some extreme things happening in the book, it's the way intimacy is conveyed is just astounding. What a talent! And of course now the Netflix series is out, and the series is probably we should talk about books only, but the series is probably the best series ever. It is absolutely amazing. So Normal People. I was going to
ask if you watched the Normal People series, because I loved it. That's what I did on my birthday this year as a little pandemic reward to myself, is that I stayed in and I watched the entire series with a bottle of champagne, and I was like, this is
I was obsessed with it too. That's the only series I literally sat down and I need to watch every episode immediately.
And it's also, I think, once many people will get to know this through the series. This is one of the series that wants to make you read. You want to see how this actually works out in words, and no one will be disappointed. I can promise you. The book is just amazing.
One of the best adaptations, I think, that it was so true to the book. Yeah. Because I was very nervous. I had had such a soft spot for that book, that it was really good.
So I've been reading Right Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. This has been, we have to say this at least once. This has been a crazy year, and as a white male European, early 50s. It's been an eye-opener for me. Actually, moving from the Netherlands with a long colonial history and everything, moving to North America has been quite a shock. It makes you rethink a lot of things. Being an immigrant is like being a stranger in your own life every day a little bit, and you question a lot of things. But this year certainly also on racism, on systematic kind of racism. That's for a long time I actually always felt a little. I became defensive quite quickly, and this book really made me realize, sure, but it's not the moral judgment that's important. You're not being morally judged, but we have to realize that by the way our history, the systems we grew up in, your background, the systems are racist. That's as obvious as also kind of difficult to get your head around, in particular then if you want to do something with it. And I'm still struggling and learning that, and as I'm sure many of us are. But I thought White Fragility is. I took a long time to read it because I found it hard to read like hours and hours. But just a very valuable book for my own learning on these topics. And it also made me go back to James Baldwin, that I read decades ago, and kind of rediscovered him. I was reading Notes of a Native Son, and you really need to go back to him. It's so fresh, it's so crisp, as if it was written yesterday. It's so topical. The man has a pen like a dagger. It is so precise. It's so clear. The clarity. It's something else. So I'm really enjoying that as well. And those 3 books stand out for me this year.
It's a great list.
And they're all available on Kobo, of course.
Yes, they are.
Of course. We'll have the links to them in the blog post for this. But as a final ask, so you talked about how much you like singing and that you're into the musicals. One thing that we've missed, like not being in the office anymore. Yeah.
I learned that you whistle, or you were a professional whistler or something like that. That I need to know.
We never get to hear you whistling anymore, Pieter.
It's true. Whistling and laughing is impossible to combine. So you make me laugh, so I can't whistle now. But that's story.
Oh, no.
I love whistling, but a friend from my high school, turned into a professional whistler, and I found out years later, actually on YouTube, he became world champion whistling. His name is Geert Chatou. If you YouTube him, you see him performing with the biggest orchestras, beautiful classical pieces, and it's whistling at the level I can only dream of.
I didn't know this was a profession. I didn't know anything.
I know. Isn't that what you want to be when you're old? A whistler?
100%.
I think, look, for me, art has been very important in my life, and literature is the kind of the profession I ended up in. But music as well is so incredibly direct. So if you want to empty your mind or kind of want to go straight to the experience, for me, music, because it has no other medium than sound, is so incredibly direct. And I guess whistling is my own little, the bird I swallowed a long time ago, and it's, my soul trying to come out a little bit. So yeah, whistling is a happy thing.
So cool.
Do you want to try and whistle, or are we making you laugh too much? See if we can capture it on the podcast.
I'm actually trying. Is there a Hamilton tune we can whistle?
What's your favorite song from the musical? I mean, that's the hardest question, isn't it?
It is the scene, and I forget what's the scene? Why do you write like you're running out of time? What's the song called? That part called? That whole scene is so beautiful because it's the combination of the aspiration that's in it, the urgency of Hamilton. Yeah, I think we've run out of time.
I'm trying to Google the name.
Fair enough.
But yes, but thank you for joining us.
Time expired.
Thank you for having me. I think the Kobo Writing Life team it's such an incredible team to work with for me. There's a lot of passion inside Kobo, and I keep saying it. It's one of our strongest engines. But the Kobo Writing Life team is this beautiful platform inside the overall Kobo business that really facilitates authors and indie publishers and works directly with them. And I'm so proud of what all you guys have delivered in the past years. As I keep telling you, this is just the beginning. We will reinvent self-publishing again and again and again. And there's a touch of magic to it, to be able to connect the creative mind to a global audience. It's just spectacular. And for me, very magical.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Pieter.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast. If you're interested in learning how to grow your sales this year, visit KoboWritingLife.com.
This episode was produced by Joni DiPlacido, Stephanie McGrath, and Tara Kremen. Editing was done by Kelly Robotham. Big thanks to Rachel for her production assistance. Music is provided by Tearjerker, and thank you to Pieter for being a guest today.
If you're ready to start your self-publishing journey today, sign up for free at kobo.com/writinglife. Until next time, happy writing and whistling.